All right, that's a great answer. We are a very tool-centric industry right now, where the answer to every problem is to throw a tool at it. What you described is almost toolless, right? Like you make your own little tools. You don't need big giant frameworks and stuff. But I mean, you do for some things. I will say that there's certain things that some frameworks are written for that are very handy, like Napalm and Netbox and stuff. It's good to use tools like that. But when it comes to things like Ansible in networking, or Chef and Puppet and Ansible, um, those kind of tools, um, that uh, I have found, and maybe you can speak to this a little, that it's even if the network team is the first team to really start thinking seriously about automation, they are not the team that's going to decide on the tool. So I don't know if you've kind of run into this. Like, what kind of tools have you looked at? And you said earlier that you talked before we started again, that that you've tried to talk about tools with other orgs, but you had challenges. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have predominantly survived to date um, on Python. Writing, I would say 100% of our stuff is in Python. And then we're an infoblock shop, and we would leverage NetMRI pretty heavily. So we would kick off something in Python, it would do a bunch of stuff, and then if we were going to push it to network gear, we crafted things in NetMRI to kind of be our, I guess, in a way, our Ansible to go out and connect to the gear and do that thing, because that was already collecting all of our gear. It had means to SSH to everything and all that, right?
What do you
Well,
mean means to SSH to everything?
as in,
Just to be clear, when you say that, what pops into my mind is, you're sitting at your desk, you have your laptop, and you want to run this script that goes and collects stuff, right? But you can't because your laptop is being blocked by a firewall that separates your corporate LAN from your production network. And so you need a way to get into your production network in order to run these scripts. And what you're saying is the NetMRI is sort of like a jump point for you.
yep, yep. For us right now, it's a jump point. So a good
Okay.
example is if our network build script that builds our data center networks, we until recently, which we've recently changed it and do some direct interaction with the gear via netconf right now, and we use PyEasy. Traditionally, what we did was we would, I guess it maybe sounds a little bit archaic, but we had this Python script that did all these things, like got some IP addresses from Infoblocks, got some VLAN information, got some BGP ASN information, kind of collected everything. And then that would spit chunks of code up into Infoblocks. And then you would literally have a job that would run that you would kick off from Infoblocks NetMRI manually. And that would log into the leaf switch and would take this chunk of code and commit it. That would
Yep.
log into this thing. It would just basically go down the line and log into all those things. So we were able to use that as kind of our, I guess I would say, our playbook manager, if you will, almost like from an Ansible standpoint, like how we would
Sure. So
interact
they
with our
have so
equipment.
they have a way to sort of classify devices in your network. And what you're saying to NetMRI is, you know, do this against this class.
Yep, yep, yep.
So
Something
you
as
don't you
simple
don't
as,
have to worry about iterating. It'll iterate for you.
yep, like it'll hit. Imagine sending everything that you need to commit for all of your equipment up into NetMRI, and then you say, if device matches this, spit this out. If it didn't match this, it would just bypass it and go to the next thing. It wouldn't even try sending it because it would.
It's the wrong thing.
Yep, yep. Where this conversation is really kicked off now is kind of when I talked to earlier, when you have all these silos that are now trying to reach out and talk to each other, right? So we are we're working on getting a Git server so that we can start kind of versioning our code across all of our teams. That's a big challenge because coming from a, again, non-developer thing, I feel like I start learning Git and then I stop using Git and then I have to relearn how to use Git all over again. And then
By the
something
way,
goes,
yeah. By the way, I'm going to stop you there real quick. That is the story of Git. There's so many. Unless you're using it every day, I don't know what it is about Get. Like I have used it on and off my whole life. If I don't use it for 3 months, my brain just like I think it's literally killing my Git brain cells. Like, and then someone's like, "You got to use Git," and I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't even know how to commit code anymore." Like after 3 months, people just
It's
forget. It's crazy.
Yep. Yep. So we have that common tool set, right? Like we have Git, which is that common tool set. And what we're kind of doing now is we're saying, hey, network team, hey, infrastructure team, hey, server team, what are some tools that are maybe more specific to your area, whether it be Ansible or whether it be Chef or whether it be like some of the teams are going as far as using, and this is where I'll admit I completely I'm not saying I'm completely lost, but I have some remedial work to do. Is when you start getting into like Jenkins and stuff like that. They're
Yep.
bringing these things up, and I'm going, okay. So we're finally getting into talking more about level setting on those kind of tool sets across the organization for how we're going to start interacting with things and why we would use this tool or not that tool. And management has come back to us and said, there's nothing off the table. You guys can bring up whatever you want to bring up. Now, there's obviously a cost aspect and there's a scalability aspect. Like if each team brings back 20 things that they want to use, well, that might not be tenable because we can't really keep track of all those things. But hey, if network team, if you have Python and you have Napalm and you have this that you want to use, or Glueware or whatever, and hey, you guys over here, if you have these 3 or 4 things, okay, that we can do. So I guess that's kind of where we're at when it comes to how we're doing this. We're just getting into that kind of
Yeah.
identifying the tools that we want to use and start baking them out, which sounds funny, but
No, no, that's normal. This is normal. Um, so what you're describing is in some ways um, I think was it Isaac Newton. He's the inventor of calculus, right? Isn't that right?
sure.
You don't know?
No.
No? Okay, I'm pretty sure that's true. I don't know if it's true. Um, but I'm pretty sure that's true. If it's not true, then I'm just going to say Isaac Newton invented calculus.
I think you're right, though. I believe you're correct. Yes.
So before him, people just did arithmetic, right? And geometry, like so many degrees, angles, stuff like that. And without can you imagine living in a world where you could not interpret the world with the help of calculus? Like it's unfathomable. And you know what? I mean, we're talking about something that happened hundreds of years ago. I mean, there's new math now that the world could not exist without math that's even worse than calculus for people who don't like math. And I would say that in your stage as a company, you're in an arithmetic stage. And I'll explain what I mean. Automation, all automation boils down to, even if it's not necessarily a continuous closed loop, it boils down to the same pattern that's across all industries, which is you have this unit, it's a control unit, and then you have your process. In your case, your process is your network. And there's like a loop even if your loop is broken and there's some manual intervention one way or the other, there's still a loop that goes between your control and the network. And what automation is for an organization is it's the calculus of infrastructure, meaning your organization has to focus on the control and not your infrastructure. And that's a huge leap for a lot of organizations. So I'll give you an example. Um, you said what triggered this is that you said you don't want management said they don't want people, or maybe it's not ideal anyways, to present to management, I want to use these 20 tools, and every silo has their own thing. You have to narrow it down to a set of tools you're going to use across organizations, and the way you bridge the gap between covering all your needs and having the right tools is you have people who focus on the process of your process, meaning you actually have full-time automation or DevOps people who are working on the core and ongoing. It never stops. They're a permanent part of your group and they never change roles. They work on the process of automating your process. And that's sort of like the calculus of your infrastructure, right? Um, and I don't, I'm ranting a little bit, but I would say, that that's a huge leap that that has to happen is to have those people. And I think you're in a good position because you have two or three guys on your team who are already turning into that.
Yeah, we as an organization, we did something that I really liked. So we built this 4-person team. We've recently moved to some of our development teams going agile, and we management saw the need for us to kind of circle back to the why we were doing this and what we were trying to do. So we coined it the CI. They coined it. I shouldn't say. We coined it the CI/CD team. So we have a member from the network team, the infrastructure team, like the server hardware guys, um, the security team, and the development team. So our application engineers. And these 4 guys are tasked with doing. It started out as just what tools are we going to use? Let's get server. Let's start identifying some of the tools we want, right? But it's kind of becoming that it's that thing that you just mentioned where it's we need people from each of these areas to be able to speak about their respective area, but also kind of start getting a level set on a common knowledge for how all of these are going to interact.
Yep.
And without that, we're all just kind of floundering with doing our own thing, and it wasn't gonna work.
Yeah. So I was actually part of this survey we just did, and it's funny you mentioned that where one of the things is, and I think this is a reflection of the fact that automation is still not outside of Silicon Valley, like real, you know, well automated organizations are kind of rare, and I think. Or outside of tech companies, especially tech companies with a lot of money, um, and and one of the things that came back on that survey was that companies that were doing automation or were down that path, who one of their biggest problems was that they had too many tools and it was actually getting in the way of being productive. They were actually not any more productive than they were without the tools. At least it felt that way to me. And the reason why I say that is because I've lived that where I was drowning in tools and because of that, I didn't like it was, they were meaningless. Right. And you want to avoid that at all costs. Like the threat of having too many different tools isn't just like, the I mean, you have all the stuff you predict. You don't have people trained on all the tools, so you end up with again people specializing and then breaking up and tribal knowledge and all that stuff. But one of the issues is that because you're not investing on making the tools meaningful, when it comes to actually fixing, this is the thing: IT is about fixing problems. It's not about building new stuff. You can engineer all you want, and no matter how awesome you think you are as an engineer, whatever you did is going to blow up in somebody's face. If it's not yours, it's going to blow up in somebody's
Eventually.
face.
Yeah.
So IT is all about fixing stuff, and unless those tools, that's the value in these tools. Unless they can help you fix it when it's broke, then I don't know. Then and the only then they're not helping you, and the only way to get there is to have these people that are focused, like you said, on and how it's all going to work together, and be focused on being automation. And like, I'm going to bring this back to what you said in the beginning, the very beginning of this conversation. You said that I asked you very pointedly, so is automation something you're doing on top of your existing work? And you said yes. The next step for I think for an organization like yours, now that you're having this conversation, you got developers on the security team and stuff, is that you're gonna, you know, the next step is you're just gonna have people who just focus on this. That's their full-time job, and now you're in the calculus of your infrastructure. If that if that makes
It
sense.
it does. I think to a certain degree. I think at some
And they're gonna
point,
make those tools meaningful.
yeah, because at some point we at our company are always going to need network engineers. You're always going to need the network guys. You're always going to need the telecom guys. You're always going to need the infrastructure guys. Those people are going to exist in some capacity. It may not be a huge team, but they're going to be there at some capacity.
Somebody
But
has to know how it works.
correct. And yeah, that brings a really, really, really good point up. But anyway, yeah, you need to have somebody that has the understanding of how this thing is working before you do this layering on top of it when you start poking the automation holes into it to say, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. Well, do you even know what you're doing? Nope, but this works, because what happens when it breaks? It's going to break at some point. Either it's going to break because you misconfigured something and you didn't use automation, so it wasn't repeatable, so you fat fingered something, or it's going to break just because something breaks. You get a memory leak somewhere, somebody plugs something in the wrong place, somebody puts the wrong parameter into the input of the switch, or something happens, right? So it's going to break at some point, so you need to have the understanding of how did it break? What was the scope of the break? Are you getting the information back? Which some of that kind of plays kind of in a fun way into what I have started to learn as I have started to mature, I guess, a little bit more as a noob developer, so to speak. Like when you start writing code, it's one thing to write code and you just kind of cobble together a script, even if it is cobbled together at first. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to start writing things that other people are going to use. Like,
Yep.
how could this person, what are all the ways that this person could break this? And then you have to kind of write around that. So that's been another interesting, little bit of a segue there, but
Right. Like you're, sort of metaphorically putting those safety plugs in all the
yep,
outlets.
yep.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Yep,
If you
especially when
have
you start,
kids, you must, if you don't know what I mean, if I have kids, we have outlets all over our
yep,
house, and we went through that phase where there's these little plastic things you can put in the
yep,
outlets
yep,
so that your kids don't electrocute themselves.
yeah. Especially when what you're doing is reaching out and interacting with that gear. It's one thing if it's logging in and functionally doing some show commands and spitting some specific information out, but it's another thing if you're hitting the button and you're logging into 70 pieces of equipment and you're making configuration changes. Totally different animal. So it's fun,
But
but
it can still feel like you're getting electrocuted if you're doing
yep.
it wrong.
Oh yes. And that's a conversation that I've had with, at least with my direct manager, is that we as an organization, we need to kind of circling this back to the challenges and maybe kind of segues into the last section you want to talk about. The people that want to do this, you have to continue to foster their want to do this. You have to encourage them to want to do this. And you have to be okay with the failure that's going to happen. Because one of the downsides, maybe
Oh,
more so
this
with
is critically,
automation,
this is a very good point.
is that when it can the blast radius for failure is much bigger than, or oftentimes is much bigger than it would be doing it manually. So you need to be okay with you being the organization, not just management, but even you on your own team when you are thinking through how you're going to automate something. At least we've done this. Is okay. You get it to a certain point. At some point, you hit enter on that thing. You're thinking through what could this blow up if it goes wrong, and how are we going to recover from that? Because it's going to happen. Something is going to happen along the lines. So.
Yeah. So I'll say, I'm going to elaborate on that. That's such a very good point. We have, when things blow up, how do you systematically deal with failure? And in networking it's still today. I mean, it's still even today. I would say most organizations still today, when something blows up, they have like one or two key people they just call automatically, and they fix everything,
Yes.
magically bring it all together, and then there's like a lot of condescension and sort of blaming and like, oh, this person didn't know what the hell they were doing, and whatever, and it's and then those people are heroes again, and then the managers can go back to sleep and whatever, and it's like, and it's the worst possible way. In so many ways, network engineers do not behave like engineers, and this is one of the ways that we as I'm serious, as a profession, fail utterly. We do not systematically deal with failure very well, because we just we have someone we can call. It just magically makes, they just wave their wand and it goes away. and you can't do that, you know. And one of the things about adopting automation, and this is again part of the whole DevOps way of thinking, is that you stop fostering golden children and you start systematically dealing with failure. And there's going to be failure in the beginning whenever you do automation. It's and actually throughout, right? Just more in the beginning, but then always forever there's going to be failure, just like there is now, except the difference is that you have a systematic way of doing it that doesn't blame people, that doesn't discourage them, that you analyze what you did, you fix it, you test it,
Yep.
and you move on. And that's it.
Yep.
Because these things are complicated. And even when you are a genius, right? I was one of those guys, I'm not going to lie. I had 3 IE certifications. I've said that a million times on the show. And even with all those certifications and 20 years of experience of working with every vendor and every possible network design and every vertical, I still made mistakes, big mistakes, and everyone does. And they say they don't, they're lying.
Yep.
And you know, we have to have a better way of dealing with it, because being the golden child it's not good for the golden child. I'm going to say that that's the first thing you got to say. You're going to burn that person out or drive them insane. It's not good for everyone else. It's just bad. And
Yep.
and part of DevOps is it's the process of the process, right? And
Yep.
this is part of when I said the calculus of infrastructure. This is part of managing the process of the process is dealing with failure systematically. And thank you for bringing that up. That's super important.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you're the guest. I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's fine. No.
Um, okay, we'll move on actually to you said something interesting. You were at Juniper's Next Work event, and you said you ran into somebody. You don't have to name names or anything like that, but they were actually. This is such a unique sort of situation where everyone knows they have to do it, but in the networking space, everyone knows automation is going to happen, and there's going to be varying ways that it evolves. But one of the things that's not really well defined yet in our industry, and every vendor has network automation training at this point, is exactly how do you train someone to be a network automation person in the field, because everyone's multi-vendor and everyone's environment is different. So what do they need to know, and how do they make it happen? And so tell us, you met somebody and they had an interesting story. So
Yeah. One of the presentations that I went to was network specific, but I can see, and I kind of borrowed it and framed it, and it wasn't anything to what a couple of the guys on the teams were talking about it were um, quasi just straight out almost developer training. One of the things that this gentleman said they did for their network engineers is they went to a local college and they said, "Hey, we've got a bunch of people here who were trying to get this knowledge base under." Um, get them up to speed on how to do this. So they took them through. They worked with this local school to develop kind of a developer boot camp so that everybody was on the same page. And that was huge for me because especially now. So kind of tailoring back to the silo thing and what we talked about earlier about silos and whatnot. Um, it's one thing for us in our group to say, oh, we wrote this Python code and this is kind of cool and this interacts with it. Oh, and hey, infrastructure guys, we used our read-only vCenter access to kind of pull some stuff from your VMware environment to help us configure this thing, right? That's okay, that's great. And maybe another person on that team could look at our code and kind of see, oh yeah, I see how you did that. That's cool, right? It's another thing when you are actively trying to develop cross-silo code, or I guess code would be a good way. Applications may be a poor way of saying it, but when you're doing things cross-silo, it's, in my opinion, super important that we kind of have a level set, that everybody kind of understands to a certain level what everybody else is doing. Even as far as the language, if I have somebody from that other team coming over by me and saying this, I'm trying to do this, but it's broken, Like, can I look at their code and understand what they're doing? When I tell some, when I go to another team, and this could be a little more specific, but when I go to another team and say, hey, what can you put that in the doc string for what you're doing? Do they know what I'm talking about? If I say we could use a function, do they know what we mean? Like all these, there's this general level of, I feel like that developers kind of have that we don't have in, generally speaking, in our traditional tech silos, networking, infrastructure, servers, all of that.
Yep.
So I don't profess to know what the answer is to that, but I feel, and I've said this before to a couple guys at work, I feel as though if we went to, we have all of these hooks to local schools, right? Because we hire a lot of developers. We have all these hooks to these local colleges, to these professors and these teachers that are there. I feel like if we went to them and said, look, we got a whole bunch of really talented engineers who are kind of going down the development road. No, they're not full on application developers, but what would be some good base level knowledge that we could give to all of them? I feel like they could come up with something, because at some point there's going to have to be, I feel like there's going to have to be some sort of formal training for us. Maybe not, but I don't know how I think it would accelerate the process of getting there if we had some form of that formal training.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's this could be a whole other topic. I feel like I want to have you back on the show because maybe bring this other person on too. Again, in an anonymized, sort of
Yeah.
format. But
Yep.
as you know, every vendor has automation training, and um, every single one. We just did a whole podcast or a vidcast or whatever this is called now. We did a whole one on this and a blog post, and they all have training and certification. So, but there is something about it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not useful. It is. It's super useful, actually, some of this training, but it's not enough to get you off the ground or something. Like it's not enough to have you think about the whole picture. And so I've always felt that way. So to hear you say that, this has been so important to you, and there's such a lack of whatever we need for someone in your org, or for this person, that we need to get a hold of and have on the show, um, to have them come on and explain to us how they sense that gap, and what and compelled them to go to a college to develop the training. That's interesting to me. That's fascinating.
Yep. I believe, if I remember it, he was framing, I feel like he was framing it in crafting like their own data sets, or I could be bridging a couple of different talks that I together there. I don't remember, but yeah,
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
I mean, basically
That
though,
yeah,
his bit about that, where he talked about that, and then there was another one. I know there was another one that talked about this idea of the organizational paradigm shift. They kind of they I took both of those as super important. They're not mutually exclusive by any stretch, but those are two big takeaways that I tried taking back to the organization, to our management, be like, look, this is what we need to be doing, because maybe not to go too nuclear here with this, but I've told, I've talked to a couple. I've gone back to the tech school that I went to and give some, like, so just give a little talk to the graduating class. There, one of the instructors there he kind of brings in industry people to kind of give these students this is what the real world's like. Like, here's school, but this is kind of what the real world's like, right? And one of the things that I started bringing up into there was how important this automation thing is, and understanding it. Like, it's getting to the point, or I don't know if it's quite there yet, but it's close to the point where especially if you're a senior engineer, I don't care what silo you're in, if you're a senior engineer and you don't know anything about Python or automation or what an API is or how to interact with it, you're probably not going to get a senior engineering job with most larger enterprises, especially if you're a senior enterprise engineer. It's one thing if it's a mom and pop shop and you can kind of, you're the jack of all trades. But it's quickly getting to that point where if you don't know what that is and you've never done it, you're probably not going to be a top pick for that for that role, especially for a senior level position. So you either have to, as an organization, foster that, or at the what's even worse is it's two pronged. Your organization's not going to benefit from what automation can give you, and you're going to start losing talent because people are going to be like, look, if I want my job to be, if I want my skill set to be relevant in 3 or 5 years, I can't keep working here. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's obviously going to go in that direction. It's so it, um, do you, so is this now for your own org when you're hiring new people? Are these attributes that you look for?
yeah, if so, I got lucky in that this, like I think, like I had mentioned, I have a new engineer starting in a couple weeks, and he was an intern, and he kind of he showed the aptitudes there for these things, not only for networking but for a lot of these scripting things. So I kind of fell into that, got lucky there. Um, if I were hiring for a new position, I would absolutely require a senior position to have some form of automation, API, Python experience. It doesn't need to be extensive, but it would be difficult for me to bring somebody on the team at a senior level that didn't know that. Now, there's caveats there. I'm not saying that not having it would be completely a disqualifying thing, depending on the individual, but it would be, if I have two close candidates from a pure networking knowledge, and one of them has API knowledge and one of them doesn't, or scripting knowledge and one of them doesn't, you can bet that I'm going to be going with the one with knowledge.
When do you think that changed for you? Like, what did that coincide with?
Um, it really happened probably within the past, well, I mean, shortly within the past couple of years, and it's so when we got into where we're at and the company we're at, and then after I came on, shortly after I brought my buddy Chris on, um, shortly after getting on, we started kind of dabbling in this automation thing. I don't remember what the impetus behind it was. I think Chris started doing a little bit, then I saw, like, I kept seeing all this Python stuff popping up, so we just kind of naturally, rolled into it. And then it's kind of been a benefit. It's kind of been both. I feel like, one, seeing the benefit that's there, and then
Yeah.
two, maybe I had been blind to it, but I feel like in the past few years it's gotten even bigger. Now I know that I've seen posts of network engineers doing things with Python for years, so it's not like network people doing Python is brand new. But I feel like in the past few years it's really taken off. So
Hmm.
I could be wrong there, but I've seen it, especially in the circles of like my direct peers in networking. 5 years ago, we weren't talking about Python or scripting or automating anything. Now, some of the guys that I used to work with at my previous company are like, "Dude, what were we thinking? We should have been learning this stuff 5, 6 years ago." You know,
Mhm.
I, I don't know why, but it just wasn't there. It wasn't a thing.
Um, okay. So I'll ask one more question, then we'll call quits because it's been an hour. Um, what do you wish you knew at the outstart of this whole automation thing for you, or had, or what do you wish could have been a thing, whether it's something you knew or some training you had or some access you had to some tooling, I don't know, whatever. Like, what do you wish um, was a thing at the start of this process? It can be more than one thing.
Right. Oh boy. Um, it and again, this could be partially because of my relative infancy in it. Um, I don't remember hearing vendors talking about this at all 5, 6 years ago. At least the vendors we were a Cisco shop. I don't remember once hearing about Python or doing anything with that. We did some simple bash scripting of certain things, but that wasn't really interacting with any gear. That was more cycling through information. So I don't think there's a tool that I wish I would have had or anything. I just wish I would have known about this sooner. Like I don't feel like I'd be so far behind the eight ball. And quite honestly, if I'd have known about this sooner, say, I don't know, oh, well, it goes back, gosh, it goes back further than that. So I went to tech school and I went back and got a bachelor's degree in technology management. Had I known then what I know now, I probably would have gone back for some more computer science type thing, like computer science type formal education, because that to me is the best of both worlds. If you have enterprise networking experience, especially where you're at now, not you, especially where we are at now, both organizationally, where I'm working, as well as I feel like where industry kind of is right now. I feel like
Yep.
that's the best of both worlds. If at least from, and it doesn't have to just be networking. You can be an infrastructure VM, engineer. You could be whatever it may be. If you have that, and then you have traditional, like you have that, and then you have some traditional training in actual software development, like that would be golden right now. So I almost wish I would have known about this sooner. It's not that I can't go back and get training now, but I feel like I'm catching up more than I'm in front of it, I guess I would say.
I'll tell you something. I kind of wish there's certain things we do as network engineers that we're expected to know. I'll give you some examples. I'll give you two examples. One is for sort of basic. The whole idea of I'll give you one very basic example, and that's the idea of subnet masks and subnetting. And one thing that always kind of drove me nuts was that there wasn't like a standard, well-known set of tools like in Linux. You have new, and so you have all the tools that come with new, and you have all the POSIX things that come baked into every Linux, ls and cat and grep and awk and sed and yak and bison and all those things. And then you have new, which has whatever, all the things that come with new, tons of stuff that just sort of built in. And Linux isn't purpose built. There's no purpose to Linux. It's a whole bunch of tools, and you can make whatever you want for the problems you're solving. And what kind of drives me nuts is that when I was first started automating, I found that I spent a huge amount of time writing tools that did things that tools should have already existed for, because we've been expected to do these things since the beginning of time. Like, here's a list of subnets, summarize them, right? I don't understand why I had to do that by hand ever at any point, or why it was ever tested on it. I don't get that. There should have been a tool built into Linux or built into Cisco iOS or Junos or something,
Right.
where I could just, okay, here's a list of subnets. Give me the summarize it on this bit boundary, and it might be more than one. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. And it's not just that. There's a whole bunch of things like that that just have always driven me crazy. Like when you do a show MAC address on a switch, how come not? This should have happened a decade ago. How come when I do a show MAC address, why do I have to guess what that vendor is? Why do I have to go and sort of? Why is that? Like, IEEE has for years had it on their website for free that you can look up,
Yep.
they have text files. You can do a search and it'll tell you this is the vendor. I don't understand why that's not automatically built into every single networking thing, because that's useful.
Yep.
Who is or whatever, the who is IP or whatever, all that stuff,
Yep.
right? I like those kind of things, right? And then um, there was the second thing, and I forgot where I was going with that. But I could make a list of these things, right? Where
Sure.
I kind of, if for me, I wish in the beginning, there's like all these sort of dumb things that I wasted a huge amount of time on that distracted me from really thinking about automation. Because what I was automating was those kind of things, and that wasn't really automating my network operations. I was automating like tricky things that could trip you up in your mind
Sure.
because as network engineers, we were taught to do them by hand. It's like, hey, I'm automating how to use an abacus. Like it didn't make sense to me, you know? I kind of wish there were tooling around that. Like if we have known we had to do subnetting since 1989, why am I still doing that by hand?
Yeah. No, that's
Right? We
yep.
work we work in tech. I don't know. That's my I forgot what I was going to say for my second thing, but that's uh, I don't know. Anyway, um, I gotta say, I really liked having you as a guest a lot, and I like this recording format a lot better. It feels more like a conversation. And I would love to have you back on.
Sure.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving me your time, for giving
Yeah.
the audience your time. We've gone now for an hour and 15 or 20 minutes, actually.
We were worried we are gonna hit 30.
I know, and you didn't drink your beer at all, dude. I gotta
I
say.
did. I should have grabbed more than one. That was my first mistake.
Okay, so if you're watching, thank you for sticking around so long. This went longer than usual, and we're gonna have Mike back on again for sure. I guarantee it. I think maybe we might do it in a pub next time if I can convince the powers that be, meaning my lady, to let me buy a camera for a tripod so I can record us a low light camera
Yeah.
so that I can record us. That would be awesome. Uh, so again, thanks for watching. I hope this has been a great show for you. I think this is one of our best shows, to be totally honest. I can't wait to post this. Um, if you again, you can follow us at Enery Labs on Twitter. You can follow me at Cloutoad, CLOUDTOAD, and you can follow Mike on Twitter. Mike, what is your Twitter handle?
Be the Mike.
Be the Mike.
BETHEMIKE.
Please give him a follow, and I think we'll be hearing more great stuff from Mike. Again, thank you very much. And hey, if you want to learn about network automation and you're just starting out, the goal of Enery Labs is that we can help network engineers with getting off the ground. And please visit us at enerylabs.io. Actually, let me verify that real quick. We just changed our URL.
That'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, I know. It would be terrible. No, that's not it. Hold on. Yeah, I know. I'm typing stuff as we're signing off. Nope, it's still the old URL. We haven't switched it yet, but it will be switched soon. It's still labs.networkreliability.engineering. And you can go there. There's no marketing wall. You can just immediately launch into a lesson and start learning stuff. So go check it out and hey, get down this path of
Yep.
learning how to automate network stuff. Right,
Yep.
Mike?
That's exactly right. It's
Sweet.
fun. Go do it.
All right. I guess we're signing off.
All right. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.